These are China's three most economically powerful super-urban agglomerations. Combined, these three urban agglomerations cover less than 7% of China's total land area. Yet, they house nearly one-third of the nation's population. In GDP terms, they collectively generate close to and often exceeding 40% of China's total output. Even considered individually on the global stage, each ranks among the world's most prominent metropolitan economies. In other words, China's real global competitiveness and the forces that ultimately define its economic ceiling are intensely concentrated in these three regions. But here's the question: why say these three? What distinct foundations propelled each one's rise? And how do they truly compare, not in size or scale, but in strategic function and systemic impact? Looking ahead 10 to 20 years, which of these will become China's most dynamic frontier? The space where ambition, innovation, and institutional evolution converge. This 20-minute episode, compiled over 30 days, takes you deep into China's three super-urban agglomerations. Let's unpack them one by one, starting with the most contested. The Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei, Jing-Jin-Ji region. Many view Jing-Jin-Ji superficially as a Beijing-dominated cluster, with Hebei perpetually lagging despite years of rhetoric about coordinated development. Yet, tangible, transformative outcomes remain elusive, but place Jing-Jin-Ji within the framework of 5 world-class urban agglomerations. And you'll see its strategic logic diverges fundamentally from the other two. Jing-Jin-Ji is not an efficiency-driven economic cluster. It is a national functional urban agglomeration. That distinction is critical. So what hides Beijing? It is not an economic metropolis in the conventional sense, but China's political center, cultural center, center for international exchange, and hub for science and technology innovation. This means Beijing cannot, and is not meant to function like Shanghai. It cannot prioritize financial and commercial efficiency the way Shanghai does. Nor can it channel all its resources into rapid industrial expansion like Shenzhen. So what ties Beijing more like a hybrid of Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, and parts of New York City. Here reside vast, invisible levers of power absent from GDP rankings, including the national decision-making apparatus, headquarters of central SOS, top-tier research institutes, and the nation's densest high-end talent network. It wields unmatched policy formulation capacity. Thus, the true core of the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region is not maximizing economic output, but fulfilling irreplaceable national functions. Tianjin's role has long been underestimated. Many observers focus only on Tianjin's recent economic volatility, overlooking a critical reality. Tianjin is the only city in northern China with a fully integrated port, a robust manufacturing base, and the institutional authority of a municipality directly under the central government. Unlike Shenzhen's point source innovation model, Tianjin is a classic asset-intensive, heavy industry, heavy port hub city. Hebei may appear the least visible, but its role within the BES system is exceptionally clear, absorbing relocated industries, providing physical and institutional space to anchor manufacturing and foundational industries. Steel, equipment, manufacturing, energy, logistics, unsexy yet indispensable. They set the 40-40 for the entire region's resilience and stability. The real challenge of coordinated development in BTS isn't willingness, it's structural asymmetry. The three jurisdictions serve fundamentally different national mandates. Beijing pursues reduced development. Tianjin drives industrial upgrading. Hebei focuses on absorbing transferred capacity and restructuring its industrial base. These priorities operate on inherently misaligned timelines and logics. Yet from a national perspective, B8's strategic weight is unparalleled. It is the only northern region capable of matching the Yangtze River Delta and the Pearl River Delta in head-to-head competition. It is also China's most politically stable and strategically secure core region. You may not admire its growth pace, but you cannot underestimate its strategic weight. Having examined Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei, we now shift to the other end of the spectrum, the Yangtze River Delta. If Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei is a functional function-oriented urban agglomeration, then the Yangtze River Delta epitomizes an efficiency-driven, market-integrated, and globally connected. 1. Put plainly, in today's China, if you examine just one region to gauge the true vitality of China's economy, the Yangtze River Delta is your most reliable indicator. Shanghai, Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Anhui together form the Yangtze River Delta, China's most comprehensive industrial system, finest industrial division of labor, and most dynamic private sector ecosystem. Many still view the Yangtze River Delta merely as wealthy, developed, and enterprise-dense. But that is only the surface. What makes it formidable is its integrated systemic capability. From basic research to applied R&D, from components to full system manufacturing, from financial services to logistics networks, from private firms to foreign invested enterprises. This entire value chain is nearly self-contained within the region. When launching a venture here, you rarely hit a roadblock. where no domestic player can deliver that critical link. Shanghai's role is unequivocally central. Not merely as a megacity, but as the region's strategic resource allocation hub, finance, shipping, trade, pricing power, and rule-making. These functions secure Shanghai's unique position in the global architecture. Jiangsu and Zhejiang, meanwhile, constitute the Yangtze River Delta's true industrial muscle. Jiangsu boasts the nation's largest manufacturing base and most comprehensive industrial spectrum, with industrial output consistently ranking among the top nationwide. Zhejiang stands out exceptionally in digital economy development, private sector dynamism, and overall market vitality. Anhui, meanwhile, is often hailed as the region's biggest dark horse in recent years. Yet a closer look reveals that Anhui's rise is no accident. It is the direct outcome of the Yangtze River Delta's broad-based spillover effects. Industrial relocation, capital inflows, and technology diffusion have collectively forged a new growth pole here. The Yangtze River Delta's strength lies not in isolated breakthroughs, but in systemic, coordinated advancement, a multi-tiered relay of capabilities across cities and sectors. That is precisely why the Yangtze River Delta is widely regarded as China's most advanced region in replicating the operational logic of mature, developed economies. Yet, the region faces distinct challenges: extreme population density, acute resource constraints, intense intercity competition, and growing signs of functional homogenization. Its future hinges on whether it can sustain an upward shift toward high-end manufacturing, original R&D, and rulemaking, not just implementation but institutional leadership. Finally, we must address the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area as a distinct case. If the first two embody stability and scale, the GBA's defining trait is one word: transformation. It is China's most atypical urban agglomeration, home to Hong Kong, one of the world's premier financial centers; Shenzhen, the nation's most innovative engine; Dongguan, a deep-rooted manufacturing powerhouse; Foshan and Guangzhou, the earliest open city and one of China's most market-oriented metropolises. Here, administrative jurisdictions, monetary systems, and legal frameworks coexist in extraordinary complexity, and it is precisely this complexity that sets its ceiling extraordinarily high. The GBA is not conventional intra-provincial coordination. It is an experimental zone spanning distinct institutional and systemic frameworks. Its core advantage lies in technological innovation and global connectivity. Shenzhen's density of tech enterprises and R&D intensity, coupled with its vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem, are globally competitive. Hong Kong remains China's foremost financial hub and regulatory interface with the world. Meanwhile, the Pearl River Delta's industrial hinterland supplies massive, integrated manufacturing capacity. Yet this is also the most complex of the three agglomerations to coordinate, with the widest internal disparities. Its success hinges on whether it can genuinely resolve institutional alignment and cross-border resource integration. By now, you'll see that none of these three agglomerations is simply stronger or weaker. Rather, they function like three distinct whole cards. The Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region underpins China's stability and strategic security. The Yangtze River Delta drives its economic efficiency and industrial depth. In the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area defines its innovation frontier and openness to the world. China's future trajectory is largely inscribed in how these three whole cards interact. So far, we've examined what each agglomeration provides from a macro-strategic perspective. Now, we turn to a more concrete question. What, precisely, are their sources of economic value? How do they sustain their populations? And what underpins their long-term competitiveness? Because an urban agglomeration is not a blueprint, it is an economic structure. Let's begin with the most intuitive and most frequently misinterpreted metric: GDP. Many rank the three agglomerations by total GDP, often concluding the Yangtze River Delta ranks first, the GBA second, and Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei third. This ordering is in itself correct, yet focusing solely on aggregate figures easily leads to flawed conclusions. What truly matters isn't who has the most IT, but how that value is generated. First, consider Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei's economic structure. In one phrase, high-end concentration at the top, and a massive foundational base below. Yet, its mid-tier remains underdeveloped. Beijing's tertiary sector dominates, especially information services, finance, R&D, culture, and public services. These are non-manufacturing, high-value-added sectors. Many institutions you see in Beijing don't directly generate large GDP volumes. Instead, they shape how national resources flow. That constitutes Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei's upper structure, while Hebei forms its fine foundational substructure. Steel, building materials, equipment, manufacturing, energy, and logistics industries with relatively low profit margins, yet enormous in scale and critical for employment absorption. The region's bedrock stabilizer. The core challenge lies in the semi-tier, the layer capable of reliably translating Beijing's science, capital, and talent into scalable, industrialized output. In Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, this translation remains inefficient. That's why, despite leading the nation in efficient innovation resources, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei lags in the flighty completeness of emerging industrial clusters, consistently outperformed by the Yangtze River Delta and the Pearl River Delta. Practically speaking, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei resembles a highly developed fatty brain, but one whose phylums, its execution and diffusion capacity still needs strengthening. Now turn to the Yangtze River Delta, whose economic structure is precisely inverted. Strength lies squarely in a robust mid-tier. By mid-tier, we mean the critical stage, bridging technological application, the full value chain from engineering and mass manufacturing to commercial deployment. Shanghai anchors the high-value front end, finance, R-rate, and branding, and access to global markets. Jiangsu delivers scale manufacturing and deep engineering capability. Zhejiang drives market dynamism and rapid product iteration, while Anhui provides cost efficiency and emerging growth engines. Together, these four roles form a near textbook model of a modern industrial economy. You'll notice the Yangtze River Delta doesn't rely on breakthroughs from any single city. Rather, it draws strength from its tightly interwoven urban network. Suzhou, Wuxi, Changzhou, Ningbo, Jiaxing, Shaoxing. Individually, they may lack the visibility of first-tier cities, but collectively, their integrated manufacturing capacity is extraordinary. That integration is the Yangtze River Delta's true moat, whereas the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area follows a fundamentally different logic. It excels at both ends, the front-end innovation and back-end global finance, but its mid-tier production and integration is highly fragmented and market-driven. Hong Kong sets financial rules and channels international capital. Shenzhen drives R&D, innovation, and core technologies, and the Pearl River Delta hinterland executes manufacturing and manages complex supply chains. It sounds ideal, but the challenge lies in how seamlessly, or rather, how seamlessly, these three pillars connect. Divergent systems, tax regimes, legal frameworks, and even language and culture create persistent friction. As a result, innovation in the Greater Bay Area tends to be burst-like, emerging suddenly in isolated domains, producing world-class firms overnight, yet lacking stable cross-regional coordination. That's why globally influential companies emerge here. Yet basic operational alignment remains an ongoing process of trial and adjustment. Next, we shift perspective to population and talent. The future of an urban agglomeration is ultimately shaped by its people. Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region exhibits a pronounced single-core demographic pool. Beijing faces virtually no competition in attracting China's top-tier talent. World-class universities, research institutes, and national-level platforms make Beijing China's most concentrated hub of intellectual capital. Yet, Beijing's high entry barriers exclude vast numbers of potential residents. Talent flows in but staying, settling, and dispersing across the region remains exceptionally difficult. Tianjin and Hebei struggle to meaningfully absorb Beijing's spillover talent advantages. By contrast, the Yangtze River Delta boasts a far more balanced and resilient demographic structure. Shanghai, a national hub for high-end talent, but Suzhou and Hangzhou, alongside Nanjing, Hefei, and others, can each absorb talent across multiple tiers and functions, from PhD researchers to engineers, from R&D specialists to skilled technicians. Each finds a precise functional niche within the region. This has forged a side-gradient population structure across the Yangtze River Delta, a key pillar of its long-term socio-economic stability. The Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, by contrast, displays a peak-shaped talent structure. World-class innovators and elite financial professionals cluster in just a few core cities. Meanwhile, its manufacturing and service sectors rely heavily on migrant labor. This structure delivers exceptional dynamism and breakout potential, but at the cost of structural stability and functional balance. Next, infrastructure and spatial organization. Transportation integration in Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei has advanced remarkably fast. High-speed rail, intercity lines, and expressways have compressed Beijing, Tianjin, and major Hebei cities into a unified 42-hour commuting radius. The real challenge isn't connectivity. It's what happens after connection. Without parallel industrial alignment, transportation remains mere physical linkage, not economic integration. The Yangtze River Delta has matured further in this regard, not by merely building roads, but by designing transport corridors around industrial complementarity. You'll notice high-speed rail lines typically link cities with highly complementary industrial profiles, not administrative rank alone. The Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area faces a far more complex spatial challenge. Gulf topography, multiple core cities, and numerous cross-border ports, making infrastructure integration inherently difficult. Yet once connected, the marginal returns are exceptionally high. By now, a clear trend has emerged. The Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region excels in national-level functions and long-term institutional stability. The Yangtze River Delta leads in systemic efficiency and deep industrial integration, and the Greater Bay Area stands out for its innovation density and global connectivity. The real question isn't which is better, but rather, which capability will China need most over the next decade? Having clarified the fight, what the three major urban agglomerations are today. This section tackles a sharper, forward-looking question. Where are they each most likely to evolve over the next 10-20 years? Because competition among urban agglomerations is never a sprint. It's an endurance race. Let's begin with a definitive assessment. China will not produce any new world-class urban agglomerations in the foreseeable future. Only those already at the apex have the structural capacity to sustain and widen their lead. And they remain these three. The reason is straightforward. Population, capital, industry, and policy dividends are intensifying their concentration at the top. Yet, this concentration does not mean convergence. Their developmental trajectories have already diverged markedly. First, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei. Its defining imperative over the coming decades is not expansion, but consolidation, strengthening its core functions and becoming irreplaceable. Beijing's role has evolved from competing in markets to setting rules and providing foundational capabilities. Basic research, frontier technologies, national laboratories, and major engineering decision-making. These yield no immediate economic returns, yet they are irreplaceable over the long term. In other words, the core value of the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region lies not in GDP growth rates, but in defining the upper limits of China's economic potential. The establishment of Xiong'an New Area is a direct extension of this logic. It is not about short-term economic stimulus, but about reshaping regional spatial structure, enabling Beijing to reclaim its role as the brain, rather than continuing to serve as the body. If Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei successfully completes this functional reconfiguration, it will become an exceptionally stable core, resilient against external shocks. It may not shine the brightest, but it will be the most steadfast. Next, the Yangtze River Delta. The Yangtze River Delta's future is less about expansion and more about self-evolution. It is already one of China's most mature economic regions, yet that very maturity brings more tangible challenges. How does it sustain leadership amid rising costs and extreme spatial density? There is only one answer: move upward, toward high-end manufacturing, toward indigenous innovation, toward standard setting and shaping global rules. You'll see the Yangtze River Delta transitioning from being part of the world's factory to becoming a critical node in the global industrial system. It's no longer about scale, it's about irreplaceability. Like high-end equipment, precision manufacturing, industrial software, and core materials, fields with low tolerance for error and high entry barriers, unsecured, they become nearly impossible for latecomers to displace. Yet this very strength also represents the Yangtze River Delta's greatest vulnerability. If innovation slows and intra-regional competition intensifies, resources become fragmented, and its competitive edge risks gradual erosion. Thus, the Yangtze River Delta's future hinges not on scale, but on its capacity for sustained evolution. Finally, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, the most aspirational of the three major urban agglomerations, yet also the most uncertain. Its ceiling rests on two factors. First, how far institutional coordination can advance. Second, whether technological innovation can sustain its global lead. If Shenzhen embodies China's most dynamic, frontier-pushing innovation engine, Hong Kong remains China's most vital international gateway, bridging capital, rules, and global standards. The issue isn't whether advantages exist, but whether they coalesce into a durable, system-wide synergy. Once coordination clicks into place, the Greater Bay Area could become China's closest approximation to a global science and technology-driven financial metropolis. Yet, if institutional friction persists, its potential may remain confined to sporadic, isolated breakthroughs. That is why the Greater Bay Area's trajectory depends less on individual cities and more on granular, cross-jurisdictional institutional progress, from regulatory alignment to mutual recognition of standards. Now, let's shift to a more concrete framing. Treat the three major urban agglomerations as distinct development archetypes. Each fulfills a core, non-substitutable function in China's economic architecture. The Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region anchors national security and long-term systemic stability. The Yangtze River Delta delivers efficiency, scale, and deep industrial integration. The Greater Bay Area drives frontier innovation, institutional openness, and seamless global connectivity. These are not trade-offs. They are simultaneous imperatives. Hence, China requires all three agglomerations, not in competition, but in complementary roles, advancing in concert. China's urban strategy is not about suppressing its strongest player, but about building a multi-core, multi-tiered system. That said, competition remains fierce among talent, capital, and industries alike. Take emerging sectors like artificial intelligence, high-end manufacturing, new energy, and biomedicine. All three major urban agglomerations are actively positioning themselves in these future-oriented industries, but each with distinct strategic emphasis. The Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region focuses on foundational and original innovation. The Yangtze River Delta excels in engineering implementation and large-scale commercialization. Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area prioritizes rapid application-driven innovation and market speed. So who wins? The answer isn't one or the other, but rather, who pushes their comparative advantage to its absolute limit. From an individual career perspective, a pragmatic conclusion emerges clearly. Which urban agglomeration fits you best depends on the kind of professional you aspire to become. Seek top-tier institutional platforms, long-term stability, and national-level missions. Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei is your ideal match. Seek structured career pathways, deep industrial ecosystems, and sustained professional growth. The Yangtze River Delta offers unmatched support. Seek high-risk, high-reward environments marked by rapid iteration and disruption. The Greater Bay Area may well be your perfect fit. By now, the future contours of China's three major urban agglomerations are unmistakably clear. Yet one final question remains unanswered. How, precisely, will these three agglomerations collectively shape China's future? Zoom out, extend the timeline, broaden the spatial frame, and a striking pattern emerges. China's future does not rest on any single city or even one urban agglomeration, but is jointly borne aloft by these three major agglomerations. Their relationship is not one of hierarchy or rivalry, but of complementary specialization. From a global perspective, China engages the world not through blanket expansion, but through strategic focus. Its competitive edge is channeled precisely through these three world-class urban agglomerations, each interfacing with a distinct tier of the global system. The Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region functions as China's central nervous system anchoring national governance, fundamental research, institutional architecture, and long-term strategic security. Much of this does not appear in GDP or trade figures, yet its absence would destabilize the entire system. Thus, the value of Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei only becomes fully apparent at pivotal moments and critical junctures. The Yangtze River Delta serves as China's power system, integrating technology, capital, labor, and industrial organization into a highly efficient, self-sustaining engine delivering steady, scalable output and immense economic momentum. During global economic turbulence, the Yangtze River Delta acts as China's most reliable stabilizer, while the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area operates as China's frontier system, positioned where change is fastest and risk highest, continuously probing the outer limits of China's economic potential. Success yields outsized returns, failure remains contained and instructive. Together, these three roles form a cohesive, multi-layered economic architecture befitting a major power. That is why China neither seeks to nor needs to replicate any single nation's urban model. Not every region must become a financial hub. Not every node must optimize for peak efficiency, nor must every locale absorb frontier-level innovation risk. This functional differentiation is the strategy a deliberate, systemic design. Viewed more concretely, these three agglomerations are actively reshaping how Chinese people live, work, and access opportunity. Population is consolidating here, drawing talent toward high-quality, future-oriented employment. Resources are increasingly concentrating in these three major urban agglomerations. So too are education, healthcare, and scientific research resources. What does this signify? It signals a strategic shift from China's earlier broad coverage development model to a new high-density model of concentrated, systemic growth. In the future, what shapes an individual's prospects may no longer be just their industry, but rather, which urban agglomeration they're part of. This doesn't diminish the value of other regions. In fact, quite the opposite. The very existence of these three agglomerations creates strategic space for the rest of the country. Industrial spillovers, capital flows, and technological diffusion ripple outward from these three cores across tiers and regions, nationwide. Pace and pathways differ, but the transmission is systemic and inevitable. Let us return to the original question. Today, only three economic clusters in China meet the criteria of world-class urban agglomeration site: the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region, the Yangtze River Delta, and the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area. This isn't aspirational language from a policy document. It's the observable outcome of real-world dynamics. Each faces persistent structural challenges, real, complex, and deeply rooted. Yet all three have already forged profound structural advantages, deeply embedded, self-reinforcing, and hard to replicate. What truly matters is not substitution, but how they preserve tight distinctive roles in competition and forge exciting complementary synergy through collaboration. To summarize their relationship in one sentence, Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei is China's siteability anchor. The Yangtze River Delta is China's growth engine. The Greater Bay Area is China's global frontier. Interfacing and China's spatial architecture over the coming decades will be fundamentally inscribed in the evolving trajectories of these three agglomerations. That concludes today's episode. Thank you for watching. If you found this insightful, please like, subscribe, and join us next time.